The man was on his knees. Not figuratively. Not in some poetic, metaphorical sense. Choi Min-jae, the man whose name appeared on 3 buildings in the city, whose signature moved millions across 2 continents, was literally on his knees beside a hospital bed, and he was shaking. Denise Walker saw it the moment she stepped back into the room. She had only gone to the nurse's station for 3 minutes. 3 minutes to update the chart, grab a cup of water she never drank, and breathe. Just breathe. She had been in that room for 9 hours straight. And in those 3 minutes, he had arrived. He hadn't noticed her yet. His eyes were fixed on the small figure in the bed. The child. Haun. 7 years old, fever-broken but still fragile, her tiny hand resting on top of the white blanket like something precious someone had set down and forgotten. He reached for that hand with both of his. And that's when the sound came out of him. Not a cry exactly. Something beneath crying. Something a man makes when crying isn't enough and screaming would be too much. A sound that lives in the chest and has nowhere to go. Denise stood in the doorway and didn't move. She had seen grief before. She had seen guilt. She had seen men perform both in hospital rooms, especially wealthy men who arrived late and needed the room to witness their remorse. She knew the difference between a man who was sorry he'd been caught and a man who was genuinely destroyed by what he'd done. This was the second kind. "I wasn't there," he whispered. Haun didn't stir. Denise stepped fully into the room. Her sneakers were quiet on the linoleum. She moved to the other side of the bed, checked the monitors with practiced calm, adjusted the blanket slightly. Min-jae looked up. He saw her for the first time. His eyes were red. Not pink from crying. Red, the way eyes get when a person hasn't slept and has been running on something corrosive for hours. He was still in his suit. The jacket was creased in a way that said he had slept in it, or tried to. His tie was loosened but not removed, like he had reached for it and then stopped, unsure whether he deserved that comfort. "Who are you?" he asked. His English was precise. Almost too precise, the kind that comes from years of careful practice. "Denise Walker. I'm the nurse assigned to your daughter." He looked at Haun, then back at Denise. "You've been here all night?" "Yes." Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise. More like impact. The way a person looks when a fact lands differently than they expected. "She was crying," Denise said. She wasn't accusing him. She was just telling him the truth. "When I first came in, she was asking if someone was coming. She kept asking." Min-jae closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped in a way that had nothing to do with posture and everything to do with weight. Years of it. Suddenly visible. "What did you tell her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I told her I was here." He opened his eyes. He looked at Denise in a way that wasn't quite recognition but was something adjacent to it. Something familiar flickering at the edges, the way a face looks when you've seen it somewhere and can't place where, and the not knowing itches at you. Denise felt it too. She kept her expression still. Because she knew exactly where they had seen each other before. She had known the moment he walked through the door. Probably before that, if she was honest, when the charge nurse had told her Mr. Choi was on his way and something in her chest had gone very quiet in a way that had nothing to do with calm. She wasn't ready to say it yet. So she said nothing. She checked Haun's temperature. Normal. Good. She noted the time. She straightened the 4-line with the same gentle efficiency she brought to every patient in every room, whether the family was present or not, whether anyone was watching or not. That had always been her way. Min-jae watched her hands. "She didn't ask for me," he asked quietly. Denise considered the question honestly. "She asked for someone," she said carefully. She was scared and she wanted to not be alone. I think when a child is that scared, what they want most is just presence. Min-jae flinched slightly. Just slightly. But Denise caught it. Because what she had just said, without saying it directly, was that presence was what he had failed to provide. And they both understood that. He stood slowly, his knees unfolding from the floor. He was taller than she expected. Broad-shouldered, controlled, even now. The kind of man who had spent decades learning how to take up space in a room and make it look effortless. But right now, standing on his own 2 feet in the small hospital room beside his sleeping daughter, he looked like someone who didn't know where to put himself. Denise moved toward the door to give them space. "Wait," he said. She stopped. He looked at her carefully. That flickering thing in his eyes again. "You don't remember me," he said slowly. "Do you?" It wasn't really a question. Denise turned to face him fully. And right then, before she could answer, before whatever was about to open between them could open, the door swung wide behind her. A woman walked in. Sharp heels. Perfect posture. A coat that cost more than Denise's monthly salary. Her eyes swept the room in under 2 seconds. The monitors, the bed, the child, Min-jae's face, and then Denise. And in those 2 seconds, her entire expression reorganized itself into something careful and controlled and not quite pleasant. She looked at Denise's hand near Haun's blanket. "What is she doing here?" Her voice was composed. Pleasant. Almost. But the question wasn't. Denise recognized the temperature of it immediately. She had been in enough rooms, in enough countries, to know exactly what that question meant when it was asked in that particular tone by a woman who looked like that at a woman who looked like Denise. She stood very still. Min-jae said. She stayed with Haun. The woman, his wife, clearly, shifted her gaze to him. All night. Yes. A pause. Then the woman looked back at Denise. And smiled. It was the kind of smile that had teeth in it, but no warmth. How much do we owe you? Denise held her gaze. Nothing, she said. I don't charge for sitting with a scared child. The woman's smile didn't waver. But something behind her eyes did. If you're a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, go ahead and subscribe. These are the stories we tell here. The wife's name was Eugene. Denise learned it from the charge nurse who whispered it in the hallway with wide eyes like the name itself was an event. That's Eugene Choi. You know who she is, right? Denise had said no, she didn't, and the charge nurse had looked at her like she had just admitted to not knowing what gravity was. Back inside the room, the air had changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. The monitors still beeped their steady rhythm. Haun still slept. The lights were still the same pale institutional yellow they always were. But the air had changed the way air changes right before a storm. That particular stillness that has nothing peaceful in it. Eugene had moved to the far side of the bed. She stood over her daughter with perfect composure, one hand resting on the bed rail, her eyes moving over Haun's face with an expression Denise couldn't fully read. Not cold. Not warm either. Something measured. Like she was assessing rather than feeling, cataloging rather than grieving. Min-jae stood near the window with his hands at his sides. He and his wife had not touched since she arrived. Denise noted that without judgment. Families responded to crisis differently. She had learned a long time ago not to read too much into what people did in the first hour of arriving at a hospital. Fear wore different faces. She updated the chart near the door, keeping her presence quiet and functional. You can go, Eugene said. She didn't look up from Haun when she said it. My shift continues for another 2 hours, Denise said. Haun is still my patient. Now Eugene looked up. We're here now, she said. The pleasantness in her voice was still there, stretched thin. She doesn't need a nurse holding her hand. She needs her family. I agree, Denise said. I'll stay close in case she needs medical attention. A beat of silence. Min-jae turned from the window. Something had shifted in his face since Eugene arrived. The openness that had been there, the rawness, had been replaced by something more careful, more managed. Like a man who had learned that certain versions of himself were only safe in certain company. Let her stay, he said. Eugene looked at him. The look was brief. 3 seconds at most. But in those 3 seconds, a conversation happened between them that Denise was not part of and could not fully read. Old conversations. The kind that married people have without words because they've had the same argument enough times that it now lives in their eyes. Eugene looked back at Haun. Fine, she said. The words sat in the room like something dropped. Denise went back to the chart. For a while, the only sounds were the monitors and the quiet scratch of Denise's pen. Haun's breathing was even. Good. Her color was better than it had been 3 hours ago. Children had a resilience that still moved Denise after 12 years of nursing. They could look impossibly fragile one moment and pull themselves back with a stubbornness that shamed adults. How long has she been like this? Eugene asked. She was admitted 31 hours ago, Denise said. Fever spiked at 104.1 the first night. It broke early this morning. Why wasn't I called sooner? You'd have to speak with the attending physician about notification procedures. Eugene's jaw shifted slightly. Denise kept her voice neutral. She wasn't going to be pulled into whatever was being laid out on the floor here. Min-jae moved to the chair beside the bed. He sat down heavily. He reached out and touched Haun's hand, the one Denise had been holding through the night, and just held it. He didn't speak. He just held it. And Haun, without waking, turned her hand over and curled her fingers around his. The small unconscious gesture cracked something in the room's tension. Even Eugene softened for a moment. Just a moment. Then she straightened, smoothed her coat, and looked at Denise with those careful, measuring eyes. "Where are you from?" she asked. The question was conversational. The tone was not. "Atlanta originally," Denise said. "I've been here 8 years. Before that, different places. Seoul." The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Denise looked at her steadily. "For a time," she said. Eugene's expression didn't change. But something behind it did. A calculation running fast, behind glass. Min-jae had gone very still. He was no longer looking at Haun. He was looking at Denise. And now the flickering thing in his eyes had stopped flickering. It had landed. "Seoul," he repeated. Slowly. "Which hospital?" Denise set down the chart. She looked at him directly, the way she had learned to look at people when the moment required honesty more than comfort. "Yonsei Severance," she said. "In the geriatric ward." The color left his face. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It retreated the way tide retreats, slowly, steadily, inevitably. Eugene was watching her husband now. She was watching him the way a person watches something they've been waiting to see. Haun stirred. Her eyes opened, glassy at first, then focusing. She looked around the room, past her father, past her mother, until she found Denise. And her whole body relaxed. Just like that. The way it does when a child finds the thing they were looking for. Min-jae saw it. And it cost him something. Right there in that room, it cost him something visible. He cleared his throat. Stood up. "Ms. Walker," he said. "I need to speak with you. Outside." Eugene turned. "Min-jae." "I'll be 1 minute," he said. His voice had changed. The careful management was gone. What was underneath it was older and less controlled. Denise followed him into the corridor. He pulled the door almost closed behind him. He stood with his back to the wall, arms at his sides, and for a moment he just looked at the floor. Then he looked up. "You were my grandmother's nurse," he said. Not a question. "Yes," Denise said. "And I had you removed." "Yes." He exhaled through his nose. Long. Slow. The exhale of a man standing at the edge of something he had been running from for 6 years. "I didn't know." "You didn't look," she said. Not angry. Not trembling. Just factual. And that was worse. He opened his mouth to respond. Behind them, his phone went off. He glanced at the screen. Something changed in his posture instantly. A different tension. Corporate. Urgent. "I have to." "Take it," Denise said. She turned back toward the room. "Ms. Walker." She stopped. "I'm sorry," he said. "For then. For all of it." She looked at him over her shoulder. "Your daughter needs you present," she said. "Start there." She went back inside. Through the small window in the door, she could see him standing in the hallway, phone in hand, staring at the floor like it had something to tell him. And inside the room, Eugene was watching the same window, with an expression Denise had never seen on her before. Something that looked almost like fear. Some stories are not just about what happens. They're about the strength it takes to stand your ground, to protect your dignity, and to demand respect, even when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever had to make a choice that tested your courage, or refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside, then you're in the right place. This channel tells stories about women who cannot be broken, and the people who learn, sometimes too late, that integrity cannot be bought. Welcome to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. 6 years earlier. Seoul, South Korea. She was 29 and she had wanted the assignment. That was the part Denise didn't tell people when she thought about it afterward. She had wanted it. She had specifically requested geriatric care at Yonsei Severance because she believed, and still believed, that the elderly deserved the same quality of presence that people gave to infants. Both ends of life were the same in that way. Fragile, honest, worthy. The patient was Choi Soon-hee, 78 years old. Former university professor of classical literature. Small woman, sharp eyes, a jaw that suggested she had survived things that would have leveled other people. She spoke almost no English. Denise spoke almost no Korean. For the first 4 days, they existed in a careful silence, communicating through the universal language of routine, the blood pressure cuff, the meal tray, the adjustment of the bed's angle, the offering of water. On the 5th day, the old woman said something Denise didn't understand. But she said it gently, looking at Denise's hands. Denise had looked down at her own hands, then back up. The old woman pointed at Denise's wrist, then at her own. Then she made a gesture with her fingers, a quiet, slow movement, like something flowing. It took Denise a moment. Then she understood. She reached out and took the old woman's hand. Soon he exhaled. Her whole body changed. The rigid posture that illness and pride and perhaps a lifetime of holding herself together through sheer will had produced, it softened. Just slightly. Just enough. That was the beginning of it. Over the following 2 weeks, they built something that didn't require words. Denise learned 3 phrases, the one for pain, the one for water, and the one that roughly translated to I am here and I am staying. She practiced them until her pronunciation made Soon-hee laugh. A real laugh, sudden and surprised, the kind that came from somewhere below strategy. Soon-hee in return started leaving small things. A tangerine on Denise's side of the room. A newspaper folded to a photograph she wanted Denise to see. Once, a poem written in careful Hangul on the back of a prescription slip, which Denise kept without knowing what it said. They had 23 days together. On the 24th day, he walked in. Denise was adjusting Soon-hee's drip when the door opened. She didn't look up immediately. Footsteps, 2 sets, male, business shoes, fast. She straightened and turned. He was 33, maybe 34 then. Already carrying himself like someone who had decided the world owed him efficiency. Suit. No tie. 2 men behind him who stood with the specific stillness of people paid to be invisible. He looked at his grandmother. Then he looked at Denise. It was the kind of look she had received enough times to recognize instantly. Not cruel exactly. Not even fully conscious. Just the particular variety of unseeing that power produces. The way a person looks at furniture, at infrastructure, at things that function but don't require acknowledgement. He turned to one of the men behind him and said something in Korean. Soon he said something from the bed. Her voice was sharp. Uncharacteristically sharp. He responded without looking at her. Denise stood still. She didn't understand the words. But she understood the shape of what was happening. She had understood it before the door had finished opening. One of his men approached her. Mr. Choi is requesting a different nurse be assigned to his grandmother, the man said. His English was smooth, apologetic in the way that people are apologetic when they are executing someone else's decision and want credit for their own discomfort. Denise looked past him at Min Jae. He had moved to the window. He was looking at his phone. I see, Denise said. The reassignment will be effective immediately. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Denise looked at Soon-hee. The old woman was looking at her with an expression that broke something open, because it was not pity, it was not embarrassment, it was not even anger. It was grief. The specific grief of someone who has watched something unfair happen and lacked the power to stop it. Soon he reached toward her. Denise went to her, took her hand one more time. The old woman spoke quietly. 2 words Denise didn't know. Later, she had them translated. Forgive him. Denise had stood up straight. She had not cried. She had nodded once at Soon-hee. She had picked up her things with the same careful composure she brought to every room. She had walked past Min-jae at the window. He didn't look up. She walked out. She did not look back. Back in the present, the hospital corridor was quiet. Denise stood outside Ha-eun's room, chart in hand, the memory settling back into the place where she kept it. Not buried. Not festering. Just stored. The way you store something you have processed but not forgotten. She had never been given a reason. She had asked, quietly, through the appropriate channels, and had received a non-answer that was really an answer. The Choi family had requested a change. The hospital had accommodated. These things happened. These things happened. She had moved on. She always moved on. Not because she was passive, but because she understood something that many people didn't. Unfairness did not require her collapse to be real. It had happened. She had felt it fully. And she had chosen not to let it hollow her out. She thought about the tangerine. She thought about the poem she still couldn't read. She thought about an old woman's hand and 2 words. Forgive him. She pushed the door open and went back to her patient. Ha-eun was awake, watching the door. When she saw Denise, she reached out immediately. Denise came to her, took her hand, sat down. Hi, sweetheart. You came back, Ha-eun said. Small voice. Absolute relief in it. I told you I would. Ha-eun looked at the door. Is my daddy out there? Yes. Is he going to stay? Denise looked at the child. At the completely honest, completely unprotected need in the question. I think so, she said. I think he's trying to figure out how. Ha-eun considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old processing information too large for her years. Then she nodded, and closed her eyes, and held Denise's hand like it was the only solid thing in the room. This channel is for women who have learned the hard way that dignity matters. If that sounds like you, I'd love to have you here. The doctor came in at 10:30. Not urgently. Routine rounds, chart check, the particular economy of motion that hospital physicians develop over years of too many patients and not enough hours. He was the attending on Ha-eun's case. Dr. Reyes, 50s, silver at his temples, the kind of doctor who had stopped performing competence because he no longer needed to. He looked at the monitors, looked at the chart, looked at Ha-eun, who was drifting between sleep and waking in that soft middle space that children occupy so easily. Then he looked at Denise. She did well through the night. She did, Denise said. You stayed the full shift? And a bit beyond. He nodded, made a note. The kind of nod that meant he understood what a bit beyond actually meant and chose to register it without making a production of it. Min-jae was standing near the window again. The same position, like the window was the only neutral territory in the room. Eugene was seated now, her coat folded across her lap, her phone face down on the arm of the chair. A performance of presence. Denise recognized it without naming it. Dr. Reyes explained the plan going forward. Monitored rest. Fluid intake. If the fever stayed down through the afternoon, discharge was possible by tomorrow morning. Min-jae asked precise, informed questions. The kind that came from someone who had done research in the hours before arriving, or perhaps from someone who simply operated at a level where preparation was automatic. Eugene asked one question. Will there be any lasting effects? Dr. Reyes said no. Children were resilient. Eugene nodded, looked at Ha-eun, said nothing else. When Dr. Reyes left, the room settled back into its particular quiet. Denise was updating the fluid chart near the door when she heard Eugene stand. I need coffee, she said to no one in particular. Min-jae. An invitation that wasn't an invitation. Min-jae looked at Denise. Denise kept her eyes on the chart. Go ahead, she said. I'm here. He hesitated. A full 3 seconds of it. Then he followed his wife out. The door closed. Denise set down her pen. Ha-eun was watching her. They fight a lot, Ha-eun said. Denise said. Neither confirming nor denying. Not with yelling, Ha-eun added, with the precision of a child who had spent years studying the ecosystem of her parents' marriage. With quiet. Denise looked at her. That's a very observant thing to notice. Ha-eun shrugged with one shoulder. My dad gets the window face. And my mom gets the phone face. The window face and the phone face. Yeah. When they're actually happy, they talk. Denise absorbed this without comment. She moved to the chair beside the bed. The one Min-jae had been using. It was still warm. Are you hungry? She asked. A little. I'll see if we can get you something mild. Does congee sound okay? Ha-eun made a face. It looks like paste. It tastes better than it looks. That's what adults say about everything gross. Denise smiled. Really smiled, the kind she didn't produce on purpose. Fair point, she said. Ha-eun watched her for a moment. Why did you stay? She asked. Last night. You didn't have to. The question was so direct and so free of any agenda that it was almost startling. Denise thought about how to answer honestly without adding weight to a 7-year-old's shoulders. Because you needed someone, she said. And I was there. But you didn't know me. You didn't need me to know you, Denise said. You needed me to stay. Ha-eun thought about this carefully. Then she nodded. The nod of someone who has received an answer that satisfies them in a deeper way than they expected. In the hallway outside, voices. Muffled, but sharp. Ha-eun heard them too. Her eyes moved to the door and then back to her hands. Denise heard Eugene's voice, controlled and quiet and precise the way controlled and quiet and precise can be its own form of cutting. She heard Min-jae respond in Korean. Short, low, a single phrase that silenced whatever came before it. Then silence. Then Eugene again. In English this time. Deliberate. She doesn't belong here. A pause. Min-jae, she stayed with our daughter all night. I don't care what she did. I care about what she knows. A longer pause. You're being paranoid. I'm being careful. There's a difference. Then footsteps. Eugene's heels on linoleum, moving away. Min-jae's footsteps, not following. Ha-eun had not moved. Her eyes were still on her hands. She was doing the thing children do when they are pretending not to hear something they have completely heard. Denise reached over and touched her hand lightly. The kanji, she said gently. I'm going to go check on it. She went to the door. Opened it. Min-jae was standing 3 feet away in the corridor, looking at nothing. He looked at Denise. She looked at him. She said nothing about what she had heard. She was not going to carry his marriage's weight on top of everything else. She's asking about food, Denise said. She wrinkled her nose at kanji, so she's feeling better. Something moved through his expression. Relief, gratitude, something too layered to name quickly. She hates kanji, he said. I noticed. He almost smiled. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face changed immediately. The almost smile gone. Something harder replacing it. Something that had nothing to do with hospitals or daughters or past. He stepped away, pressing the phone to his ear. What do you mean the board is meeting? He said. His voice dropped but didn't disappear entirely. I authorized nothing. Who called it? He turned his back. Denise went to find the kanji. But as she walked down the corridor, she passed the small family waiting area where Eugene was standing near the window. Not sitting, standing, and on her face was an expression that stopped Denise mid-step. Not distress. Not worry. Satisfaction. The careful, private satisfaction of someone who has just watched something they set in motion begin to move. She hadn't noticed Denise yet. Denise kept walking. But her mind stayed behind. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect your dignity, this channel was made for you. Eugene had not always been this. She knew that. She held that knowledge the way you hold something heavy and familiar, constantly, without thinking about it, in a way that had become indistinguishable from just existing. She stood at the window of the family waiting area and watched the parking lot below without seeing it. She had grown up in Incheon, a neighborhood that no one described as good unless they were trying to be kind. Her father drove delivery vehicles. Her mother worked 2 jobs that Eugene had spent years telling people were one job, because 2 felt like something to hide. She had been the first in her family to go to university, the first to leave Korea, the first to become something that didn't have a simple name in the vocabulary of where she came from. She had met Min Jae at a conference in Singapore when she was 26. He had looked at her the way men like him looked at women like her, with interest that was mostly curiosity and a little bit of assessment, the way you look at something that surprises you in a context where you didn't expect to be surprised. She had looked back at him with complete clarity, because she had understood, even then, exactly what she was looking at. Potential. Not romantic potential. Not at first. The potential of a life that would never resemble the one she had come from. She was not ashamed of that. She had never been ashamed of being strategic about survival. But somewhere between Singapore and the life they had built, something had shifted. She had stopped being strategic and started being afraid. And fear was a different engine entirely. Fear did things that strategy never would. She pulled out her phone, checked her messages. One from her assistant. Done. Filed through the hospital's third-party records liaison. No direct trail. She put the phone away. She thought about the nurse. Denise Walker. The name had surfaced in Min Jae's face the way names surface when they carry weight. That micro-expression of recognition, quickly managed, the slight jaw tension. He thought he had hidden it. He hadn't. Eugene had been reading Min Jae's face for 15 years. She knew every frequency it broadcast. She had started making calls within the hour. What came back had surprised her. Not the soul connection. She had suspected something like that, a prior interaction, some past friction she hadn't known about. That was manageable. What surprised her was the grandmother. Soon he had specifically requested Denise. Specifically. Soon he, who had trusted almost no one in the last years of her life. Who had viewed most of Min Jae's decisions with a gentle, devastating skepticism that she expressed through a single raised eyebrow and silence. Soon he had liked her. And Min Jae had sent her away. Eugene pressed her lips together. She knew why he had done it. She didn't need him to explain. She had seen him do versions of the same thing a dozen times over the years. The flinch away from anything that disrupted the composition of a room. The invisible hierarchy he operated within even when he was the most powerful person present. It was cultural and it was personal, and she had never once called him on it directly because she had been doing the same thing in her own way for years. But that woman had paid the price. And now she was here. And Haun had reached for her. That was the thing Eugene kept coming back to. Haun had reached for her before she reached for either of her parents. Eugene understood, intellectually, what that meant and what it didn't mean. Haun was 7 and feverish, and Denise had been there all night. It was not a verdict. It was not a referendum on motherhood. But it had felt like one. And feeling was where Eugene was most dangerous. Because feeling was where her strategy lost its cleanliness and became something messier. Something she could not always control. She heard Min Jae's voice down the corridor. Urgent. Clipped. She did not go toward it. She had already done what she intended to do. Now she needed to see how it landed. Down the hall, Denise was returning from the kitchen with a bowl of broth and crackers, having negotiated Haun out of the kanji entirely. She moved with that same unhurried competence that Eugene had noticed from the beginning. Nothing performative. Nothing that required an audience. That was the thing that unsettled her. Denise Walker was not performing dignity. She simply had it. Eugene had spent years learning to project a version of herself that was impenetrable. She had built it carefully, deliberately, out of necessity. And it had served her. But it was a projection. And somewhere underneath it, the woman from Incheon who had learned to translate her fear into control was still running. She watched Denise disappear through the door of Haun's room. Heard Haun's voice, muffled, something about crackers. Heard Denise laugh. Eugene turned back to the window. Her phone buzzed again. Different contact this time. The board. She answered on the second ring. Yes, she said quietly. A voice on the other end. Professional. Careful. The filing went through. Meeting is being called for tomorrow morning. And the source stays clean? Completely. It reads as an anonymous internal tip. Good. She ended the call, put the phone in her coat pocket, and stood for a long time looking at the parking lot below, where ordinary people in ordinary cars moved through an ordinary Tuesday, completely unaware that above them, in a room on the 4th floor, everything was about to collapse. She told herself she had done what was necessary. She told herself it was protection. She told herself she was not afraid. But her hands, when she finally looked at them, were pressed flat against the window glass. And they were not quite steady. Strong women recognize strong women. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The bowl of broth had gone cold. Haun had eaten half of it and fallen asleep mid-sentence, the way children do, without ceremony, without warning, one moment present and the next completely gone. The crackers were still in her hand when her eyes closed. Denise removed them gently. She set them on the tray. Sat back. The room was quiet in the way hospital rooms are quiet at midday, not peaceful exactly, but suspended. The monitors doing their steady work. The light outside neutral. The sounds from the corridor reduced to the occasional footstep, the far-off announcement. Denise had been in enough quiet rooms to know that quiet wasn't the same as still. Something was still moving. She could feel it the way she sometimes felt a change in a patient's condition before the monitors registered it. A shift in atmospheric pressure that didn't have a clinical name but was real enough. She pulled out her phone. Checked her messages. Nothing from the charge nurse. Nothing from the scheduling system. Her next shift didn't start for another hour. She was technically off the clock right now, sitting in this chair because she had chosen to be here. Because Haun had asked if she was coming back, and she had said yes. She thought about what she had seen on Eugene's face in the waiting area. She replayed it carefully. Not anxiously. Just honestly. Satisfaction. The specific kind that comes from having moved a piece. Set something in motion. Denise had worked in enough environments. Hospitals in 3 countries, wards with complex interpersonal ecosystems, family dynamics that would have required a sociologist and a therapist working in tandem to fully map, to recognize when she was standing inside someone else's strategy without knowing the rules. She was inside one now. She just didn't know all the pieces yet. The door opened. Min Jae. He looked like he had aged slightly since the last time she had seen him in the corridor 20 minutes ago. Whatever the phone call had carried, it had deposited itself somewhere on his face and hadn't let go. He came in quietly. Saw Haun sleeping. Something in his posture eased. He looked at the half-eaten broth. She ate, he said. Half, Denise said. She negotiated for crackers instead of congee. She hates congee. You mentioned. He moved to the chair on the other side of the bed. Sat down slowly. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he said, without looking up, "Are you familiar with a Dr. Park Sung-woo? Administrative records. Hospital affiliations." Denise went still. "Should I be?" she said. "Someone filed a complaint. Through official channels. Against your nursing license." He paused. Using records from Seoul. The room's suspended quality became something different. Denser. Denise kept her face and voice steady. What kind of complaint? Negligence. A patient from the geriatric ward at Yonsei Severance. He looked at her now. Direct. Uncomfortable. The complaint is fabricated. I know it is. Because I know who that patient was. A long silence. Do you know who filed it? Denise asked. He didn't answer immediately. That was an answer. Denise looked at the sleeping child between them. She thought about something soon. He had once done. A small, wordless gesture in a hospital room on the other side of the world, and how that gesture had meant more than a great number of speeches she had received in her life. She thought about Eugene's hands pressed flat against the window. When was it filed? She asked. This morning. Early. Before I arrived. Denise processed this quietly. What are you going to do? She asked. He looked at her. Directly. I don't know yet, he said. I'm telling you because you deserve to know. Whatever happens with the board, whatever happens with the complaint, I won't let it stand. The board, she said. He exhaled slowly. There's a meeting called for tomorrow, to review financial irregularities. He rubbed his jaw. The timing is not coincidental. Denise looked at him. Someone is moving against you, she said. He nodded. And they're using me to do it, she said. He didn't deny it. Haun made a small sound in her sleep. Her fingers moved across the blanket. Both of them looked at her. She settled. You should know something, Denise said finally. She kept her voice even. Measured. I've had false complaints filed against me before. In a different context, different country. It didn't end my career. She paused. Because I know who I am and I know what I do. And the truth of that has a longer reach than whoever filed the paperwork this morning. Min-jae looked at her. She continued. But I want to be clear with you, Mr. Choi. I'm not afraid of this. I'm not going to disappear quietly to make someone comfortable. If that complaint goes forward, I will respond to it. Fully. And everything connected to it will come into the light. He held her gaze. Everything, he said. Everything, she said. Including soul. The words sat between them. Not as a threat. As a fact. Min-jae nodded slowly. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a card. Set it on the tray table beside the half-empty broth bowl. My direct number, he said. Not the office. My number. Denise looked at the card. Didn't pick it up yet. The complaint, she said. Can you tell me who specifically filed it? He looked at the floor. I have a strong suspicion, he said. Is it the same person who called the board meeting? A pause. Then, yes. Denise nodded. She picked up the card. At that moment, the door opened. Eugene. She looked at Denise first. Then at the card in Denise's hand. Then at Min-jae. Her face was composed perfectly. But her eyes moved to the card with the specific involuntary focus of someone who has just seen something they did not plan for. And in that half-second, before the composure reassembled itself completely, Denise saw it. Not guilt. Something more complicated than guilt. The look of a woman who had placed her bet and was watching the board rearrange itself in a direction she didn't control. The monitor screamed. Not metaphorically. The actual alarm, that sharp, sustained, merciless sound that clears every other thought from a room instantly. Denise was moving before the second beep completed. She was around the bed, hand on Haun's wrist, eyes on the screen, mind already running through the differential before anyone else in the room had fully processed what was happening. Haun's oxygen saturation had dropped. Fast. 84. 81. 79. Get the attending, Denise said. Calm. Absolute. The kind of calm that is not the absence of urgency but the mastery of it. Eugene had stood up so fast her chair scraped back against the wall. Min-jae was already at the bedside, his hand reaching for Haun's face, and Denise intercepted him gently but firmly. Don't touch her yet. Let me work. He pulled back. Immediately. Without argument. That registered somewhere below the emergency. A man who could override a room full of board members without blinking had just stepped back at her word without a second of resistance. Denise repositioned Haun slightly, checked her airway, looked at the rise and fall of her chest. Shallow. Too shallow. She reached for the oxygen mask on the wall mount and had it in place before Dr. Reyes came through the door 30 seconds later, a nurse behind him. What do we have? Sats dropped to 78. Back up to 86 now with supplemental. Breathing is shallow. No fever spike. My guess is a mucus plug or early bronchospasm. Dr. Reyes was already at the bedside. Stethoscope. Listening. Nodding. Good call, he said quietly. The next 4 minutes were medical and focused and had no room in them for anything personal. When Haun's saturation climbed back above 94 and stayed there, the room changed pressure. The way rooms do after a near thing. Everyone breathing again without knowing they had stopped. Haun opened her eyes behind the mask. She looked directly at Denise. Denise leaned close. "You're okay," she said. "You scared us a little, but you're okay." Haun's eyes moved to her parents standing back, then returned to Denise. She reached up with 2 fingers and touched the back of Denise's hand. Just that. 2 fingers. The smallest possible gesture. Denise stayed completely still and let the child hold on. Dr. Reyes spoke quietly to Min-jae and Eugene near the door. Explanations, precautions, monitoring protocol going forward. His voice was measured and professional, and Denise tracked it peripherally while keeping her attention on Haun's face and the monitor above. When Dr. Reyes left, the 3 adults were alone again with the child and the machines and the particular aftermath of fear that leaves people briefly honest. Min-jae came to the bedside. He looked at his daughter, then at Denise. "Thank you," he said. It came out simply. No performance in it. No management. Denise nodded once. Eugene had not moved from near the door. Denise glanced at her. She was standing with her arms at her sides, and her face was doing something Denise hadn't seen it do yet. Not the composed surface. Not the calculating attention. Something underneath both of those. Something that the last 4 minutes had pushed up through the careful construction of her. She looked like a mother who had just watched her child almost disappear. For a moment, just a moment, she was not strategic. She was not afraid of Denise. She was not running any calculation at all. She was just a woman whose daughter had just frightened her badly. Denise looked away. Gave her that. Min-jae pulled his chair close to the bed and sat. He put his hand near Haun's, not quite touching, waiting to see if she would close the distance. She did. She moved her hand onto his without looking at him, still watching Denise. "Can she sleep?" Min-jae asked. "Yes. The mask stays on for now. I'll check her again in 20 minutes. He nodded. Eugene crossed the room slowly. She stood at the foot of the bed. She looked at Haun, and something passed across her face that had no strategy in it. "She looks like you," Denise said quietly to Min-jae. "Around the eyes." He looked at his daughter. "My mother used to say that," he said. "My grandmother said she had her eyes." A pause. "Soon Denise said. He nodded. Eugene looked up. The name sat in the air between the 3 of them. Not accusatory. Not weaponized. Just present. "She talked about Haun," Denise said. "In Seoul." She couldn't say much in English, but she had a photograph. She kept it on the table near her bed. Min-jae looked at her. "You understood her?" "Not her words. But enough." He was quiet for a long moment. "She died 4 months after you left the ward," he said. "I don't know if you knew." "I didn't," Denise said. "She asked for you. At the end." He said it carefully, like each word had weight he was choosing to carry rather than set down. "The nurse on duty told us afterward. She asked for the American nurse with the careful hands." The room was very quiet. Eugene was looking at the floor. Denise absorbed this. She let herself feel it fully, quietly, in the part of herself where the true things lived. The tangerine. The poem. The 2 words. Then she let it settle. "She was a good woman," Denise said finally. "She was the best person in my family," Min-jae said. No hesitation. Just truth. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and the moment closed. His jaw tightened. He stood. "I have to step out." He looked at Eugene briefly. She did not look back at him. He left. The door eased shut. Denise and Eugene were alone in the room except for the sleeping child. The silence was different from any previous silence between them. Eugene moved to the chair Min-jae had vacated. She sat down. She looked at Haun for a long time. Then, without looking at Denise, she said, "She really asked for you. At the end." That's what he said. "Soon he didn't ask for people," Eugene said. "She endured people. There's a difference." Denise said nothing. I've been her daughter-in-law for 15 years, Eugene said. She was kind to me, respectful, but she never once asked for me. She said it without self-pity. As a fact. The way facts sometimes sound when they have been carried long enough to lose their sting and become simply true. Denise watched her. What you did, Eugene said finally. Still not looking at her. The filing. The complaint. Yes. It was wrong. A pause. I won't apologize yet. But I want you to know that I know it was wrong. Denise considered this. Why not yet? She asked. Eugene looked at her then. Direct. Because I'm still afraid, she said. And I'm not ready to apologize for something I haven't stopped doing. In all her years, in all the rooms she had sat in, Denise had never heard anyone say exactly that. She didn't know what to do with it. Neither did Eugene. And before either of them could find out, Min-jae came back through the door. His face had changed completely. The board meeting has been moved up, he said. Tonight. 8 o'clock. He looked at Eugene. And they have a second file, he said. One I've never seen before. The fear on Eugene's face was real this time. And it was not about Denise. She stood alone in the corridor and she almost left. That was the part Denise would not tell anyone afterward. Not because she was ashamed of it, but because some truths belong only to the person who lived them. The moment when the choice was real and the outcome was not guaranteed, and she had stood at a genuine fork and looked down both paths. It had happened an hour after Min-jae's announcement about the board. He and Eugene had stepped into the hallway together. A private conversation, low voices, the particular intensity of two people who have stopped performing for each other and are dealing with something real. Denise had sat with Haun until the child was fully asleep, then slipped out to give them the room. She had walked to the end of the corridor. Stood near the window at the far end that looked out over the hospital's east lot. Evening coming in, the light going gold and then gray. Her feet were tired in the way that went past the physical into something else. Her shoulders carried the specific weight of a day that had required more of her than she'd planned to give when she'd clocked in 30 hours ago. She thought about Atlanta. Her apartment. The specific quality of quiet that existed there. The coffee she made every morning in the same cup. The run she took on Tuesday evenings along the riverside path where nobody needed anything from her and she was just a woman moving through air. She thought about what Eugene had said. I'm still afraid. And I'm not ready to apologize for something I haven't stopped doing. She thought about the false complaint sitting somewhere in a system. Her name attached to a record that said she had been negligent. That she had failed a patient. The kind of filing that could follow a person quietly for years, surfacing at the worst moments, requiring explanation at every new job interview, every license renewal, every moment when she needed the truth of her own record to speak for her without interference. She had built that record over 12 years. 12 years of double shifts and difficult families and moments no one witnessed and choices that required her to be better than the situation deserved. And someone had reached back 6 years into the past and put a lie in the middle of it. She pressed her palm flat against the cold glass of the window. She was not a person who catastrophized. She did not tend toward panic. But she was also not a person who pretended that real damage was not real. The complaint was real. The board meeting was real. Whatever Eugene had set in motion was already moving, and it had her name on the front of it. She could leave. Right now. Tonight. She could speak with the charge nurse, formally transfer Haun's care, remove herself from all of it. She had done nothing wrong. Her presence here was not required. Min-jae had her phone number. The child had stabilized. Every professional and personal obligation she had arrived with had been met and exceeded. She could walk away clean. And she thought about it. Honestly. Without guilt. Then Haun's voice came back to her. Not the sick voice from the night before. Not the fragile, feverish, where is somebody voice. The voice from this afternoon, when she had woken up and found Denise still in the room. You came back. Said with that absolute relief. The kind that comes from a child who has learned, already at 7 years old, that people leave. That presence is not guaranteed. That someone staying is something worth noticing. Denise had promised nothing. She had made no commitments. She had simply stayed. But staying had meant something. She pushed off the window. She turned around, walked back. Not because she had resolved every question. Not because she had calculated the safest path or mapped the strategy. Simply because there was a child in a room at the end of this corridor who had said you came back with that voice, and Denise was not able to be someone who left after that. She was passing the family waiting area when she heard it. Min Jae's voice. Low. Tense. Then who else had access to her soul records? It wasn't public. It wasn't in any system I could reach without specific contacts. A pause. Someone responding. She couldn't hear who. Then Min Jae. Find out who she called. I need names. Denise did not stop walking. But she filed that away. He was already investigating. Not waiting for the board meeting. Not accepting the situation as presented. He was moving laterally, gathering information, doing what people with real intelligence do when they are threatened. They don't just defend, they map. She respected that. She went back to Haun's room. The child was still sleeping. The monitors were steady. The oxygen saturation read 96. Good. Denise sat down. She picked up her phone and opened her email. There it was. She had been avoiding it for 2 hours. Official notification from the State Nursing Board. A complaint had been received. Under review. A response was required within 14 days. She read it twice. Then she did something she had learned to do in the first hard years of her career, when she had encountered versions of this before. Not this specific thing, but the category of it, the experience of being targeted in a system that was not designed to protect her first. She opened a new email. Addressed it to her attorney. A woman named Carmen Rodriguez who had handled 3 previous professional matters for Denise and who Denise trusted completely. She wrote 2 sentences. A complaint has been filed against my nursing license using falsified records from a previous employment in Seoul, South Korea. I need you to begin gathering my full employment record and patient documentation from Yonsei Severance Hospital, specifically the geriatric ward, for the period I worked there 6 years ago. She sent it. Put the phone down. Sat back. She was not going anywhere. And whoever had filed that complaint was about to discover that Denise Walker did not simply go quiet when things got difficult. She never had. She had learned that lesson young, in rooms that were harder than this one, and it had never left her. The door opened. Min Jae. Alone. He looked at her sitting calmly in the chair beside his sleeping daughter, and something moved across his face. Something she couldn't fully name. Recognition, maybe. Of a kind of steadiness he hadn't expected to find here. You're still here, he said. I said I would be. He came in. Sat down in the chair on the opposite side of the bed. I know who made the calls, he said. I have a name. Not Eugene directly. She used an intermediary. But the trail connects. Denise looked at him. What are you going to do with that? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to the board meeting tonight, he said. And I'm going to walk in with everything. He looked at her directly. But I need to know something first, he said. Your records from Seoul, are they clean? Every interaction, every patient, every notation. Is there anything that someone with bad intent could twist into something usable? Denise held his gaze. My records are clean, she said. Completely. He nodded. Then I need you to trust me for the next 12 hours, he said. Can you do that? Denise considered the question honestly. She thought about Seoul. About a hallway and a man who had not looked at her. About a grandmother who had asked for her at the end. About a 7-year-old who said you came back. Don't make me regret it, she said. He nodded. His phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen. And went completely still. What? Denise said. He turned the phone toward her. It was a news alert. A photograph. Min Jae himself, outside this hospital, taken apparently within the last hour. And beside it a headline that had clearly been prepared and timed and released by someone who knew exactly when he would be most vulnerable. Her name was in the headline. Denise Walker's name was in the headline. The headline read, Choi Enterprises Board calls emergency meeting amid allegations. CEO's links two disgraced foreign nurse under scrutiny. Denise read it once. Then again. Disgraced. The word sat there in clean digital print like it had always been true. Like it was simply a descriptor. Like someone had looked at her life and her record and her 12 years and had found the single most damaging word available and had placed it next to her name with the confidence of someone who expected it to stick. She set the phone down on the tray table. Her hands were steady. Min Jae was watching her. "I'm not disgraced," she said. Simply. "I know," he said. That word was chosen deliberately. "Yes. To connect your scandal to my name so that anyone investigating you would find me attached to it. Dirty by proximity." She said it analytically. Not with outrage. With clarity. Because outrage would cost her energy she needed for something more useful. Min Jae stood. He was pacing now, not erratically, but with the controlled energy of a man running through strategy in his body because his mind needed the motion. "The intermediary Eugene used," he said. "His name is David Lim. He works adjacent to the board. He's been quietly positioning himself for the last 8 months." He stopped pacing. "This isn't just about me. And it isn't just about you. You're a tool. I'm the target. And the tool was chosen specifically because of our history." Denise absorbed this. "Someone told him about Seoul," she said. "Eugene told him about Seoul. So she found out about Seoul before today. She would have looked the moment she saw how Ha-eun responded to you." He said it plainly, without defending it. She investigates anything she perceives as a threat. It's not personal. It's who she is. "It became personal when she put my name in a legal filing," Denise said. He stopped. "Yes," he said. "It did." A moment of silence. "The board meeting is in 3 hours," he said. "I need to be there. I need to walk in having already made the first move, not responding to one." He looked at her. "The complaint against you, I can have it formally challenged tonight. I have the documentation that proves Soon-hee's records from that ward show no negligence. I have access to the hospital's administrative log, which will show the complaint references a case that was never formally filed at the time. It was manufactured. How do you have access to that?" Denise asked. He looked at her carefully. "Because I kept everything related to my grandmother's care," he said. "Every record, every report, every document from that period." A pause. "I kept it because I knew, even then, that I had handled it badly. I didn't know why I was keeping it. I told myself it was due diligence. But it wasn't." "No," he said. "I think some part of me knew I would need to account for it eventually." Denise looked at him for a long moment. "Use it," she said. He nodded. He called someone. Short. Korean. Rapid. She caught a few words she recognized from Seoul. The numbers, some formal language, a name repeated twice. When he ended the call, he looked more grounded. The pacing energy had converted into something more directed. "My legal team is pulling everything now," he said. "By the time I walk into that boardroom, the complaint against you will be formally documented as fraudulent." He paused. "It won't undo the headline. But it will undo the substance." "The headline will outlast the correction," Denise said. "Yes," he said. "It usually does." They sat with that truth for a moment. From the bed, Ha-eun stirred. Neither of them spoke until she had settled again, her small chest rising and falling under the oxygen mask. "Tell me about David Lim," Denise said. Min Jae looked at her. "Why?" "Because you said this isn't just about you. And I want to understand what I'm standing in the middle of." He sat back down. He considered her for a moment, not deciding whether to trust her, she thought, but deciding how much of his world to bring into this room. "David Lim joined the board's advisory structure 8 months ago," he said. "Quietly. Through a channel that I approved without fully investigating because I was in the middle of 3 separate acquisitions and I delegated the vetting." He said it without excusing himself. "He has been building relationships with 2 board members who have been unhappy with my direction for the company. He doesn't want me removed because I'm a bad CEO. He wants me removed because he has a buyer for the company's Asian division, and my presence blocks the sale. And Eugene. His jaw tightened. Eugene and David Lim have been in contact for 6 weeks, he said. I didn't know until this morning. I should have known sooner. What did she stand to gain? He was quiet. I don't know yet, he said. That's the part one can't map. She would lose as much as I would if the company is sold off piecemeal. He shook his head. Unless she's been promised something separate. Something outside the company. Denise thought about Eugene at the window. The satisfaction on her face. And then the fear, later, when Min Jae had mentioned the second file. She didn't know about the second file, Denise said. He looked up. What? When you told her the board had a second file, one you hadn't seen, her fear was real. It wasn't performed. Denise paused. Which means David Lim has been using her. She gave him the tools, Seoul, my records, the access, and he built something with them that goes beyond what she authorized. Min Jae stared at her. She's not an ally to him, Denise continued. She's a resource he's finished with. The room was very quiet. That's why she's afraid, Denise said. Not of you finding out. Not of me. She's afraid because she realized she handed a man she doesn't fully control a weapon she can't take back. Min Jae sat back in his chair. He looked at his sleeping daughter. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at Denise with something in his expression that she had not seen there before. Not gratitude. Not guilt. Something that looked like the particular respect of a man encountering a mind he had not anticipated. I have to go, he said. He stood. Stay with her. Not a request this time either. But different from before. This time it sounded like he was asking her to guard something he valued. He was at the door when Denise said, Min Jae. He stopped. The name, his actual name, first time she had used it, registered visibly. Whatever happens in that room tonight, she said. Don't let them make this about me to distract from what it's actually about. I can handle my own defense. You focus on yours. He held her gaze. Then he left. Denise sat in the quiet. Haun's breathing was even. The monitors were steady. Somewhere across the city, a boardroom was filling up with people who had found her name useful. She picked up her phone. Carmen had already replied. At the bottom of the email, a single line. I found something in the Seoul records you should know before tomorrow. Call me as soon as you can.